Before this video starts, allow me to ask you a question. Do you like burn? Do you like bleed? Do you perhaps even like boys? And most importantly, do these multiple paragraphs of text confuse you? Well, then this is the video for you, as I am here to explain exactly how everything here works and functions with each other, because you can imagine that with 3 different keyword status effects, 6 unique status effects, unique interactions with literally every other House of Spider ally, and 8 Hulk skills, that there are some people who are confused about its identity. And so, let me describe this identity in 3 sentences to you before we get into the nitty-gritty details, as all you need to really know is your family is dead. Phantom Trace's string severance is fuel. Entanglement stacks need to be full. Anyway, shout out to everyone who got the Ultra Kill reference. But what I mean is quite literal. The first thing I want to stress to you, if you want to understand this identity, is that entanglement is the snowball factor in all of this. This is the thing that increases damage on every skill and gives her skill 3 and 3-2 extra attack weight and coins respectively. The higher you can get this status, the stronger a Ryoshu will get. And to fuel the literal killing machine that is this identity, you need to get this number up. Now how do you do that exactly, you may ask? Oh, well, that's simple really. You increase it by killing your friends, family and loved ones. Oh, well, I guess Phantom Trace too. To explain it a bit more thoroughly, a Ryoshu has a status called String Severance, which she gets whenever she indulges in petty revenge against her horribly abusive family by killing a House of Spider ally. And as a byproduct of gaining String Severance, she gains Entanglement. And speaking of the HOS allies, the amount of them you deploy determines the maximum and minimum stack of Entanglement, so they are basically mandatory to run if you want to use a Ryoshu to her maximum potential. The secondary way she gains Entanglement is through targeting enemies who have Phantom Trace, and the absolute easiest way to explain this status effect is that this is basically index targeting but better. At the start of each turn, a random enemy gets inflicted with Trace, and if Ryoshu attacks that enemy, she gains Entanglement on top of using her skill 2-2 for completely free against the target. And once again for this, Ryoshu also indulges in petty revenge against her family, because the more HOS allies are dead, the more targets get inflicted with this status effect per turn. And that in turn means you can get more Entanglement stacks. Now the big question you may have is how exactly do you kill your family? In Limbus company, of course. For legal reasons, I cannot tell you how to commit manslaughter in real life, but however, I can tell you how to commit manslaughter in a video game. Anyway, when a Ryoshu uses her defensive skill, it will trigger skill 1-2 to go ahead and attack an HOS ally in descending order of deployment. As once the sinner that is being targeted by this skill is done using their own skills for the turn, a Ryoshu will instantly jump in for the kill like a feral dog, which as a little cherry on top actually causes her to get this status effect as fuel for her great Killer ego on kill. And since we're on the topic of that ego, I would like to briefly mention that she has this passive that makes the ego passive activate on killing her allies as well. It is nothing substantial really, but I thought I'll mention it anyway because someone is going to threaten to erase me from existence if I neglect to mention it. Additionally, I would like to also briefly mention that there's actually a second snowballing mechanic in play in the form of the Star Blade. This is basically a counter that increases per turn and also increases per blade trail after image you inflict in total during the whole fight. And this whole status acts purely as a countdown until Ryoshu uses her strongest move, as at a certain amount it will cause her to use skill 3-3, which permanently buffs her for the rest of the fight by giving her Shin and removing her first stagger threshold. It will also cause skill 3-2 to replace a skill on the dashboard, which heavily benefits on String Severance. And so this is also why getting these status effects is super important. It is because a Ryoshu will, once per encounter, unleash a massive nuke skill. And if you can kill as many of your allies as possible and gain a bunch of entanglement before that happens, then you can use it at its maximum potential. To stress the importance of it, for every String Severance she has at the moment of using it, she will use her first coin an additional time and gain final power on the last coin depending on entanglement. Which is by all metrics and counts absolutely insane, as in if the maximum amount of coins that can be gained this way is 10, because that's how many HOS allies will get eventually, that'll become a 12 coin skill. And so with that, you want to constantly target enemies with Trace and have her kill as many HOS allies as possible before the countdown to her nuke reaches the stacks required to use skill 3-2. And I've neglected to mention so far that the more allies she kills, the more tanky she becomes and the more skill slots she gets, thanks to this passive. And also thanks to the way String Severance works, and also skill 3-3 removing her first stagger threshold. She single single-handedly becomes a literal killing machine once you play into her gimmicks. And now that all the preamble is done, let's actually talk about her skills and what she actually really does. Though I will briefly put a list of everything I haven't mentioned about the passives here as a brief summary on screen for you to read. Oh yeah, also, once she kills enough allies to the point that there's no longer backup left, she apparently changes the music for the scene. Which... that unfortunately gets her written in the Book of Vengeance for trying to compete against Ricardo Heathcliff's Oxcord. And also my own personal Book of Vengeance, as I'm a rather big fan of the middle. Anyway, as I mentioned before, Ryoshu has 8 whole different skills. I'll go over the regular skills first before covering the conditional skills later. So let's start with skill 1. Triple Slash is Ryoshu's bread and butter for inflicting blade trail. Preferably, we want to avoid spamming this before we have the nuke of skill 3-2 set up. But if you don't care about that or want to rush the passive that requires a certain amount of blade trail, then this is a good way to do it. I will mention though, a lot of Ryoshu's burn and bleed application is locked behind crit conditionals in a lot of her skills, especially this one. When we look at the skills, you have to keep in mind that she is a poise identity first and a burn bleed identity second. Much like how, for example, another very similar identity, Captain Ishmael, is a bleed poise identity first and a burn identity second. Which, yes, fun fact, this is our second poise bleed burn identity in the game. Keep that in mind as it will briefly be relevant later. Skill 2, Triple Slash Echo Shear, on the other hand, does not have blade trail application but inflicts status effects much more reliably. Honestly, the skill is weirdly enough nothing very special. Like sure, it has extra damage depending on entanglement, but every skill in this kit has that. I would recommend prioritizing this skill if you don't want to generate blade trail or want to prep for a massive nuke instead. But that is really all about I have to say about this skill. Skill 3, Red Space, on the other hand, is a lot more interesting as it benefits far more from entanglement in the form of extra damage and extra attack weight, and also extra blade trail application. It also acts as immediate deluge to trigger bleed and burn with, so preferably you want your enemies to have high potency and count of set statuses before using it. And also, while we're at it, I would like to stress, make sure you have other identities that are able to support the burn and bleed count, as outside of a crit conditional on her skill 1, she does not have any count application herself. When I described her as a killing machine that needs constant fuel, I really meant it, as a big benefit of the skill is just non-existent when the burn and bleed count cannot be supported. Then we move on to the unique skill. Starting with skill 1-1, Slay the Heavens, this is the skill that is exclusively triggered by a Ryoshu using her defensive skill, as she will attempt to end an ally's life once they are done with their own skills. And since we're on the topic of defensive skills, here is what it looks like. The actual effects of the dodge itself is not that impressive, but what it causes to happen is much more interesting. You're sort of forced to play really offensively with this identity, because for example, if you want to simply dodge an attack, you will be punished by her jumping one of your allies and killing them. The best way to use her is to let her become a dodge tank whenever you want to kill allies, but outside of that it will be much more preferable to play offensively. Then we have skill 2-2, Inevitable Termination, which is the skill that is used against targets who have found trace if she targets them. Preferably you want to save using a skill 3 against a trace target until you have multiple targets with trace on them, as the first time it is activated this way it becomes an attack weight skill and could do a lot more damage than it otherwise could. Outside of that though, it is also a source of slash fragility in their kit, which is going to enhance the damage on Blade Trail 2 as it deals slash damage. And lastly, we have the 2 different skill 3s. Starting with skill 3-3 first because it's short, Red Space String Connection is really just there to activate Shin and happens automatically once you reach enough of the Hui Star's blade stacks. Skill 3-2, Red Space Echo Shear, I don't think I have to describe it that much because I've already stressed its importance, but this is the big nuke skill that you're building up constantly. Once skill 3-3 is used, a skill in your dashboard is replaced by skill 3-2 and can be used whenever. Outside of what I've already mentioned, this skill likes building up burn and bleed potency on the first coin, which will be used repeatedly to finally burst it all on the second coin that'll benefit from additional final power up depending on entanglement. Now the team building options are rather obvious here, but what if I told you that there's actually a second really powerful team that you can use outside of running just purely the House of Spider identities? Because funny enough, remember when I said that she's the second burn bleed boys identity in the game? Yeah, funny enough, Captain Ishmael also falls under that category. And because you have 2 identities that cover 3 whole different status effects in them all at the same time, you can actually run a rather unique team that is composed of 3 different keyword status effects, which is going to be insane for Mirror Dungeon. So, in case you don't feel like running the House of Spider identities or feel like using this identity in a very quirky way, I will be providing you the following team that you can use for Mirror Dungeons and go all the way up to extreme with. Because trust me, I've run this team before, but without Ryoshu, and it is a rather powerful, fun team to use. But that about does it really, as I've described everything about the identity that there is to describe. This video is a little bit different from what I do usually, but I want to try to upload more consistently. And doing identity kit reviews is usually a good way of doing this. So let me know what you think of this kind of content and whether I should do more of it. And if you haven't subscribed, please do, as these videos take a lot of effort to make due to the incredible time constraints I have to work under when making these kinds of videos. So yeah, like and subscribe. Also, shout out to anyone else who does these identity reviews. I would highly recommend watching their videos as well if you want to be even more informed about this identity. But if I may recommend, you could also watch these videos instead. Anyway, that is all from me. Have a nice day, and I hope you enjoyed this new identity.